Just hit the subscribe button, the red button, underneath this video over to the right, and that'll sign you up on my YouTube channel. And then you can hit the small bell icon, so a little bell will go off and tell you each time I've started to broadcast a new one. I hope you enjoy it. I never mind when people disagree about economic policies going ahead into the future, but it does annoy me when they fail to absorb the lessons of economic policies we've already tried in the past. And in looking at FDR's record of coping with the Great Depression as president in his first two terms, we have really a clear indication of what works and what didn't work, and an indication as to why Trump's policies are becoming so successful. When the New Deal started and Roosevelt took office, the dominant immediate need was to deal with the nation's banking crisis. All the banks were closing. And he instituted a bank holiday and reformed the banks, or gave people the impression that he did, moved up reserves, and the banks were permitted to reopen. And this emergency legislation stopped the hemorrhaging that was going on. After that, he moved to adopting two fundamental bills that were designed to regulate the economy and regulate us out of the Depression. One was the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, that said that farmers would be paid for not growing, and the other is the NRA, the National Recovery Administration, that said that businesses would be rewarded with public recognition if they raised wages and raised prices to fight deflation. And that concept of voluntary and incentivized regulation was the basis of the New Deal's effort in 1934 to fight the Depression. And it didn't work. There was very little in the way of reduction of unemployment, and the Depression remained at about the same level. That led to the administration's decision to monkey with the gold standard. The dominant problem was deflation, prices going down to levels where people would still postpone buying because they think they'll go down more the next day, and where workers couldn't get enough in wages to support the buying power to let a recovery happen. So Roosevelt decided to basically go off the gold standard. You could no longer get gold in return for dollar bills. That's why our dollar bills now are called Federal Reserve notes, not silver certificates, because you can't get silver for them, but you can bring them to the Federal Reserve Board and not get gold. But that didn't do much either. And then Roosevelt took to arbitrarily trying to manipulate the price of the dollar and the amount of price of gold, and that also was ineffective in reducing unemployment. He then moved to a fourth stage in which social insurance dominated. The idea that you could protect people from the catastrophes and vicissitudes of life. And he was very successful in passing landmark legislation on Social Security, unemployment compensation, workers' compensation, regulation of hours and wages, and was very important. And that stuff is crucial in our landscape of programs, but it didn't do much to deal with the Depression either. Then Roosevelt decided that the key thing was bank reform. So he felt that you needed to strengthen people's confidence in the banking system. So he passed the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that insured federal bank deposits. And that did strengthen confidence in the banks, but didn't do much for unemployment. So Roosevelt, who was a fiscal conservative when he was elected, went against his better judgment and sanctioned a massive program of public works. And from the Public Works Administration run by Harold Ickes and the Works Progress Administration run by Harry Hopkins, a wide variety of public works projects developed, at some one point employing more than 5 million Americans, a hefty percentage of the labor force working on government public works. And Hoover Dam, the Grand Coulee Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority, many of the highways that dominate our major cities, all came as a result of that program. And it provided very important short-term relief, a reduction in unemployment that permitted Roosevelt to win the election of 1936 handily, and it appeared that the Depression was increasingly ending. But it didn't end. After the 1936 election, the Depression came roaring back with what was called the Roosevelt Depression of 1937. And what happened was that Roosevelt had imposed the Social Security tax in 1937, but benefits were not paid until 1941 because it was theoretically social insurance, and you had to let the savings accumulate before they would be paid out. Also in 36, they had paid the veterans' bonuses that was so controversial during the Hoover years, and that wore off by the next year. So Roosevelt was stuck back with a 22% unemployment rate, which it had been when he took office, dipped to 13% with his public works program, and now the damn thing was back up to 22. So he embarked on a program of deliberate deficit spending, Keynesian economics. Keynes was not well known in the United States at that point, and his theories were only just beginning to get credibility here. They'd already dominated British financial policy. And following Keynes's model, reluctantly and kicking and screaming, Roosevelt began to rack up huge budget deficits. In the past, they'd only been 1% of GDP, but now they soared to 4 and 5% of GDP. And with this significant expansion of deficit spending, the economy finally began to recover. And then by 1939 and 1940, when the war orders kept coming in, and the government ran a deficit where the deficit was almost as large as its total budget in an effort to win the war, the economy roared ahead, fueled by this massive influx of deficit spending. Now, what's the lesson? Obama tried this, and it didn't work. And that was partially because he was doing it through government spending, which did not kindle hopes for long-term recovery, just a feeling that I had cash in my pocket today. But Trump has done it through tax cuts that fuel the hope that things will be better in the future, as well as putting money in your pocket today. And that seems to be working really well. Just go back and look at Trump's predecessor in this, Franklin Roosevelt. I've just written a new book, 50 Shades of Politics, which is unlike anything I've written before. It's a series of 100 short, 2 pages each, autobiographic essays and stories and vignettes and tales from my career in politics, my time with Clinton, my work in 40 countries around the world and in every state in the country. You can't buy it in bookstores, but you can online at Amazon.com. It's not a heavy lift. It's $13.99 for a paperback and $10.99 for a Kindle. Thanks for watching.